So what are some other tests that you can do? Next one.
2. Ask for confirmation.
So this is what I do all the time, especially when it involves a big decision. I don't ever want to just go by one single sign or feeling. So I usually ask God to please give me some sort of confirmation. Now, I'm not demanding anything from him. I am simply humbly requesting confirmation. And I have found that God will almost always respond in some way to that request. So what kind of confirmation can you ask for? So first of all, you can just leave it open-ended, and rely on God to give you some sort of sign that you will recognize. Believe me, he is more than capable of doing that. And that is what I often do. It is a humble request to surrender to whatever sort of confirmation God wishes to give you. But when you make that kind of request, you step aside and give the reins completely to God. So think about the bird and the deer from my stories. I didn't ask for those signs, but when they happened, I knew for certain that God was speaking to me. You can ask for a specific sign, but be careful about this kind of test because you are kind of making a demand of God, and he may not choose to go the route that you have chosen for yourself. So I usually ask for open-ended confirmations.
All right. So asking for a specific sign is also called putting a fleece before God. Have you heard of that? So if there's anybody out there who doesn't know what I'm talking about, I want to quickly tell you the story because it's from the Bible. Okay, so this putting a fleece before God, that saying, that comes from Judges 6. So it's a story in the Old Testament. And this is when God called an Israelite man named Gideon to lead an Israelite army to fight against their enemy. And so actually the angel of the Lord, we are told, came to Gideon and tells him this message. Now, Gideon was not a soldier. Gideon was a simple farmer. And so when the angel of the Lord came and said, Gideon, I want you to lead an army and defeat these Israel or the Canaanites, I can't remember who the enemy was. But anyway, that was a very scary thing. And so Gideon wanted to make absolutely sure, God, that you really mean this. Are you sure? So what he did was he put a fleece before God. And here's how he did this. So he said, God, if you really want me to do this, then here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put this fleece, so a little piece of wool from a sheep. I'm gonna put this on the ground at night. And so in the morning, if this fleece is full of dew and the ground is dry, then I will believe that you really have told me this. And so that's exactly what happened. And the next morning, he went out. He was able to squeeze a bowl full of water out of the fleece, and the rest of the ground was dry. But he was still terrified. So he's like, okay, God, please give me just one more sign. And so he said, so tonight, God, I'm going to put the fleece out again. And so if in the morning, if the ground is totally wet, but the fleece is dry, now I'll believe you. And that's exactly what he did, what God did. And so Gideon went on to lead the Israelites into a very successful battles and won against Israel's enemies in some amazing, miraculous ways. So that is putting a fleece before God. And so that's where that phrase comes from that story about Gideon. So we do have a biblical example here of asking God for a very specific sign. But like I said in the video, I don't like to do that very often. I don't feel very comfortable with it simply because you're kind of dictating to God how you want God to respond or how you want God to act. And I don't really want to do that. But there have been a few times in my life where Craig and I have given God a specific fleece, a specific request for a confirmation. So I want to tell you about one of those stories. So and this is a recent example. So if you follow my channel, you may remember that a year and a half ago, back in December of 2023, Craig and I bought a piece of property that has a restaurant building on it that is right next to our homestead property. And so God gave us all of these tons and tons of signs, very, very miraculous signs. This was kind of a scary thing for us. We're not rich. This wasn't an easy thing for us to do. But God gave us so many miraculous signs that we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that we were supposed to buy this. And I'm sure I will tell you the whole story at some point. But for now, it's just important to know that God made it very clear. I did talk about it a little bit 2 weeks ago when I was telling the stories about angels and my glory director angel. And so I mentioned one of the signs. Here was another sign. Have you ever seen a double red rainbow? That building, that little red building, that's the restaurant building on that property. The rest of the property around it is part of our homestead. So yeah, that was one of the many, 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 many signs that God gave us when he was telling us to buy that property. Right there, that rainbow, that red rainbow goes right down into that building. Yeah, just one. I mean, I wouldn't make a whole big, huge decision based on one rainbow, but after God gives you, tons and tons of huge signs, that was just one of them. Okay, so anyway, here's the fleece story. So this was in December 2023 when we bought this, but then in the fall of last year, okay, so 2024, hadn't even had it for a year yet, this couple comes to us and they told us that they wanted to buy the property. So we hadn't put it up for sale, the restaurant property. We had not put it up for sale. It wasn't in our mind to do it. God had just told us very clearly to buy it. So, but we are very open to doing whatever God wants us to do. So we told them this wasn't in our mind, but let us go and pray about this and then we'll get back with you. And so they were Christians, so they understood what we were talking about. So that's what we did. And so now this is a very, very good opportunity or a very good situation for a fleece, because God had already seemed to give us directions in a different way to buy the property, which we had done. So it was not something that seemed like God was directing us to. So we would need really, really clear proof. So this is why this was a situation where we felt comfortable putting a specific fleece down. And so here's what we did. So Craig and I went off separately and prayed separately for God to give us an amount, an asking amount. And then the first sign would be if God gave us the same amount. We didn't tell each other amounts. We just went and prayed. Then when we came back, God had indeed given us the exact same amount. So the next sign then was to see if they would accept that. So we did. So we went back. We told them the whole story. We prayed about this. This is the amount God told us. Here it is. Now, the amount that God told us was significantly more than the building was worth. We knew it. We knew they knew it. In fact, when God told us that amount, we're like, no way. Ain't no way. They're not going to say yes to this. So it was just going to be a miracle if they said yes to it, right? Well, they said yes. So they agreed on the price. So this was definitely a huge, huge sign from God that he did indeed want us to pursue this and to keep going and to start the process of selling the building. And so we did. They accepted it. So we signed the contract. We started going through all the hoops, the many hoops that you have to go through, inspections and all the stuff to sell property. And we set a closing date. And so we went through that whole process. But the most important part of it was that we had absolute peace because of the huge sign that God had given us. We knew we were in God's will and we were doing what he wanted us to do because of the way that we did that. Now, let me tell you something. So Craig and I do that a lot. So if you with your spouse, your partner, if you want to kind of work together to get signs, a lot of times Craig and I will go off and we will pray separately about something. And then we will see what God tells us each. And then we come back and we confer with each other. And God uses that a lot of times to direct us. So anyway, okay, so we go through this process. We set a closing date. And here's a surprising twist to this story. So 1 week before closing, the couple calls us and they pull out of the deal. And now at this point, Craig and I had started getting really excited about selling this because we were going to make a significant profit, right? It was going to really help us out financially. So we were all excited, And so when they called us and they pulled out, we were really surprised. We were very disappointed. But yet God's doing this. This is under God's control, not ours. And so we just, we accepted it. We were very gracious. We were very nice to them about it. Like, sorry to hear that. If you change your mind, let us know. We gave them back their earnest money that we did not have to do. So we were, just very, very gracious and kind about it. And evidently, it was not God's plan for us to actually finish the sale. So we know he wanted us to start the process. We don't know exactly why God did it the way he did. Maybe he was working on something with the couple, that we don't know about. If nothing else, for us, it was an exercise in practicing obedience, and that's the wonderful thing about living this way in complete submission to God's will, under his direction, following his direction. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to be anxious because God's got this. God has a plan. He knows the future. His plan really is the best.